Hello, and welcome to the Wild Review. Today, I'm going to be talking about Born Yesterday, a movie that came out in 1950 and barely fits on my marquee. Now, originally, for this movie, I had written up a ton of notes where I was going to talk about the director, the actors, and all these things. And while I will still touch on those topics, I don't think that's the key focal point of why this movie is relevant to today. Born Yesterday is about money and politics and corruption in the United States, and I think that this is a very relevant topic that transcends the 70 years since this movie was made. And if anything, it's actually even more painfully obvious and painfully necessary to have this message in today's world. Now, as I said, Born Yesterday was released in 1950. It was directed by George Cukor, and it starred Judy Holliday, William Holden, and Broderick Crawford. The whole premise of the movie is that there's an uncouth junkyard tycoon who comes to DC and he's looking to buy a congressman and get into politics so that he can make laws and rules around his business and make himself more money. He hires a political reporter to teach his chorus girlfriend how to navigate social norms in Washington, D.C. because she's kind of a ditzy, uneducated girl.
How do you like Washington, Mrs. Brock?
I haven't seen it yet.
The irony in this is that he is also incredibly uneducated, but it's not a problem for him because he's a man who's very rich.
Mr. Brock?
How are you?
Mr. Brock, Mr. Devery
I
asked
thought
me.
you said this was private. What are you waiting for? Take off.
And so people completely ignore his really, really boorish and aggressive behavior because of his money.
I would like to point out, Mr. Brock.
It's all right.
I would like to point out, Mr. Brock, that this suite is one we... That this suite is...
Now, if any of that sounds familiar to you, to what has happened in Washington in the last 4 years, you'll see why that this movie has some deeper relevance to it. Now, briefly going over the actors, Judy Holliday plays Billy Dawn, Broderick Crawford plays Harry Brock, who's the junk tycoon, and William Holden plays Paul Verall, who's the newspaper man who's supposed to teach Billy how to properly live and communicate in Washington, D.C. society.
Show her the ropes, sort of. Kind of explain things to her and like that in his spare time.
Now, the crux of this movie comes into the play that Harry's lawyer has told him to put the company in Billy's name so that he's not held liable for anything that may happen in the business. And since she's his fiancée and she doesn't really care about what's going on because she's more focused on getting hers.
He thinks I'm too stupid, huh?
No.
He's right, I'm stupid and I like it. I'm happy. I get everything I want. 2 mink coats, everything.
She just signs all these things away. But as she spends more time with Paul and he kind of educates her in the ways of the world.
Now, here are a few of the places you ought to see.
A few.
Let's start with the Capitol. I'll tell you all I know about it first, and then we'll join one of the tours. Senate's in session today. We might be able to take that in. But first, let's go to the Rotunda.
And how society is evolving and what is happening in the world. She realizes that the way that Harry is running his business and the way that Harry is trying to run Washington, D.C.
A cartel.
internally through buying a congressman is not right, and it doesn't align with her beliefs. And over the course of the movie, she decides that she's not going to let Harry boss her around anymore. She's not going to let her lack of education dictate her behaviors. And so she not only does she educate herself, but she also swerves Harry's plans to buy a senator. So the biggest message in this movie, and I think that, I mean, it's a little preachy, but I think it's very on point, is the fact that education can really change the way someone views politics and the world around them. And this is so freaking relevant to what's going on. We have for the last 4 years, we've had an uneducated, boorish guy who's just bullied his way through Washington, D.C. and pushed his way through this, much like Harry Brock is in this movie. He's uncouth, he's uneducated, he doesn't really care for how rules work or what the laws are or the spirit behind them is.
All right, what happened?
It's just this, Harry. It may take a little more time.
And a little more money. Yeah, why more? We're all in this deal. Now you pull your weight in this boat or I'll get somebody who can. Do you hear me? Good?
Quite a temper, hasn't he?
Don't mind him. He's always lived at the top of his voice. So long, Norval.
He just wants to get what's his. And that's, like I said, it's super relevant to what's going on. And I think that's where this movie really plays to its strengths. The acting is good. I think Judy Holliday is a very good Billy Dawn, even though her voice is a little bit obnoxious. She plays the character well. And Harry Brock is played by Broderick Crawford, who's really, really an arrogant jerk for the whole movie.
God, pan me. Tell them I'm a mug and a roughneck. Everybody gets scared. For me, that's good. Everybody scares easy.
And he just is always trying to put people around him down to make himself feel better, even though he claims that he's alright with who he is.
What do you mean, London or England? That's the same thing.
It is?
London is in England. London's a city. England's a whole country.
I forgot.
Oh, brother, you got patience.
So it's these characters play off each other the whole movie, and there's nothing special about the cinematography. There's nothing special about the direction and all these things. The movie is very competently put together with a strong central message that really focuses this movie. I've seen this movie about 3 times, trying to get a better grasp of what I want to talk about for this movie, because this movie struck me as powerful, but I couldn't quite figure it out. So I had all these notes. I wanted to talk about, the direction and the cute stories behind it, all these things, but really, that's not what's important about this movie. What's important about this movie is that the message it has for the viewers. The message it has for the people this movie is presented to. Now, this movie was remade in 1993 with Melanie Griffith playing Billy Dawn. Unfortunately, that movie got nominated for a Razzie, and it's just not a good movie. So this is, if you want to show people this movie, the 1950 original source material is the way to go. And I recommend it. Like I said, it's not necessarily because the acting is amazing or the direction is fantastic, but because it tells this story of how you can change your own life and make your life better and your understanding of the world around you better through educating yourself, using real sources, and kind of finding who you want to be as a person through this method. And like I said, the movie can be a little preachy, but it has these caricatures playing these characters, but also that's not that far off from real life. I think Harry Brock is very close to a character for Donald Trump. They have so many similar personality traits where they just get by on being jerks essentially to everyone around them, but because they have some level of influence, some degree of money or whatever, power or whatever it is, they get away with it, even though they're quite literally just trying to erode the foundation of democracy.
Okay. And I made every nickel of it. Nobody never give me nothing.
And that's why I found this movie so powerful. This was 70 years ago, and they had the same complaints they had then as they had now, and clearly our system needs change. And this movie kind of shows a good place for that to kind of start, is with people trying to be better people around us. One of the more fascinating aspects of this movie is Billy Dawn's character, played by Judy Holliday. Billy Dawn is a chorus girl from somewhere who is just essentially going to marry Harry because he's nice to her, he buys her nice things, and he treats her all right.
So, as long as I know how to get what I want, that's all I want to know.
And by all right, this is 1950s standards all right, where he doesn't hit her that much, and it's pretty terrible. But again, for the context of the movie, he treats her all right. So that's kind of the state of women in the 50s is one thing, but that's why she's gonna marry him. Is he's fine, he has money, she's happy with what she gets out of that relationship.
If you don't act friendly. I don't act friendly.
And initially it's a selfish point of view, and she's kind of a microcosm for the American people in a lot of ways, where as long as they get something they think that they want, they're happy with it. But as she educates herself and kind of like goes through, she reads texts from famous authors, but also like from like historical authors who talk about like the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She reads Thomas Jefferson. She reads
Thomas Jefferson last week, and this week Tom Paine.
all these books, and it shows her grow as a character. And like this is what I really liked about this movie is it's a little painful. The movie's about an hour 45 minutes, and a lot of that time is spent watching her kind of figure her stuff out, which doesn't make it necessarily an exciting movie, but her journey is very interesting.
What are you trying to do with those books? Hatch them?
Because it really goes through those uncomfortable stages of learning where she's losing the foundation of what she thought was what made her happy. She's losing these ideas of like, oh, this is the way the world is. And as she's learning more and more, she doesn't know what to think anymore, and she struggles with that a lot.
What?
Like getting all mixed up in my head. Like wondering and worrying and thinking. Stuff like that.
And I think that's something that often goes unmentioned when people talk about the learning process, is how uncomfortable and how painful it can be.
Last night I went to bed, I started thinking I couldn't fall asleep for 10 minutes. And I didn't know if it's good to find out so much so quick.
Paul is the reporter who's helping her kind of through this process. He's kind of giving her the source materials to read and walking her through this. And one of the things that he tells her is like, you know, the point of learning is to grow and not to shrink yourself.
There's room for all sorts of things in you. The idea of learning is to be bigger, not smaller.
Because she thinks that he wants her to listen to classical music and just read these old-timey authors, but really the point of that is to grow your experience and not to shrink. And I thought that was a very powerful moment in the movie, where he doesn't want her to narrow her experience to just these very pretentious things. But she can enjoy jazz music and also Tom Paine, and she can enjoy reading stuff by Thomas Jefferson, but also the funnies in the newspapers. Like it's to widen your experiences. I think that's a very common issue that people run into, is they think that learning is very stodgy and it's dull, and it ends up making you feel pretentious, because a lot of people who are educated come across as really freaking pretentious, which of course who wants to be like that? They're jerks. And so this movie kind of shows that, you know, it's a different approach to it and a different thought process behind it. And while Paul himself is very educated and he's a writer, he also falls into that trap. You know, it's very lightly touched upon, where Billy shows him an article of his that she read, but didn't understand any of the words in it, because he's very verbose and he uses a lot of big words.
What'd you think?
I think it's the best thing I ever read. I didn't understand one word.
And so, like, he can't reach his target demographic, and that's kind of what she shows him. But it's a very brief scene. I wish they'd done a little bit more on that to develop Paul's character, because he's pretty stagnant throughout the whole movie. But the movie's not really about him. It's about Billy Dawn and her growth. And what's interesting is, in comparison, is that while Billy is growing, Harry is not. Harry has stayed the same throughout the whole movie. Even though they've been in Washington, D.C. for some undetermined length of time, it's been enough for her to really broaden her horizons, and Harry is not. He's still an uncouth jerk who takes his shoes off when he walks into a room, even though that's very not polite, who pushes people around and yells at them, even though he has no right to.
Wait a minute, Harry! Cut it out, Harry! Cut it out, Harry!
And so, in the beginning, she's very reverent to him, or deferent to him, and at the end of the movie, she just ignores him. She's like, she realizes that he has no power over her.
Wait a minute, I'll tell you where you're going.
You!
Sure. In this whole thing, I guess you forgot about me.
Because he wanted to use her as a scapegoat for his business, and as a result, now that she knows what's going on, she's actually in control of this relationship and of his business.
About how I'm a partner? That Jim once told me. 126 different yards I own.
Control.
Same thing. So here's how it's gonna be. I don't want them. I don't want anything of yours to do with you, so I'm gonna sign them all back.
All right.
Only not all at once, just one at a time.
The power dynamic and the power switch is really good in the movie, and it really comes together at the end of the movie. But it's a bit of a slog to get there. Like I said, about an hour 45, and the movie doesn't rush getting there, which is fine. One of my favorite things about this movie is that it never really talks down to its audience. Billy Dawn is uneducated, and she's a chorus girl, and she's kind of ditzy, but she's never dumb. They hint at this early in the movie with her being able to learn how to play gin rummy with Harry. Harry teaches her, but then they have a scene where she outplays him.
Gin.
$34.
34.
$34.
And like just destroys him in cards. And the movie's never preachy about its approach to education. The idea is that education is for everyone, and we need to broaden it. And the more people are educated, the more they can make better decisions that impact themselves and do better for themselves.
I'm just trying to show you that legislation's not meant for buying and selling.
This country with its institutions belongs to the people who
Inhabit.
Inhabit it.
The movie does a really good job of not being patronizing to Billy Dawn or to us, its viewers. So I think it's a really gentle way of communicating that message, which I think that a lot of people have lost that tact when trying to help people help themselves. And I think that's something that like we can learn a lot from this movie in that sense. Like, hey, calling somebody dumb and telling them to educate themselves is not actually a helpful mechanic.
I know. That's why I wish I was doing better.
You're doing wonderfully.
It's no use. Most people just laugh at me if they knew what I was trying to.
I'm not laughing.
It's saying like, hey, here's more ways you can learn stuff that might help you and might broaden your horizons. It should be in a helpful way as opposed to an aggressive, demeaning way. It's a very, very gentle movie in that sense, and I appreciate the tact the movie takes with this subject because it's not an easy subject to tackle, and the movie it feels very approachable throughout the whole movie. So now, this is a pretty quick brief review. I don't think this movie is too complex to really go over. I think it has some good cinematography, good acting, with a powerful message. Is this movie good? Judy Holliday won the Academy Award in 1950 for this movie. I don't think this movie is particularly amazing. Maybe like I give it, it's a good movie. It's definitely not bad, but it doesn't really suck me in with the directing, the acting, all these things. What I really like about it is the message it sends and how well it sends that message. I think I think the movie is fine. Do I like it? Yes, I like it a lot. But once again, I think that I like it a lot as a result of kind of the world we're living in today and what this movie means to me in that sense. It's like it's a message, it's a hopeful message.
I want everybody to be smart. I want them to be as smart as they can be. A world full of ignorant people is too dangerous to live in.
And it also says like, this struggle has been going on for a long time, and we just have to get a little bit better every day. And hopefully that's kind of what's happening. But I like this movie. I think it's a hopeful, powerful movie in that sense. So if you want to watch it, it's available on Amazon for like $3 or $4 for rental. I think it's worth checking out. But yeah, enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. Oh hey, didn't see you guys there. Thanks for tuning in and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like, subscribe button, and comment below. You can also ring that bell so you're notified anytime I upload new videos. If you have some more time, since you're really busy right now on YouTube, you can also watch more videos of my content. Yeah. It's a good time. We review movies from all the time. All the decades. 20s, 30s, modern. Stay tuned.